They smile with charm, speak with confidence, and carry themselves like they own the room, but beneath that surface is something they desperately hope you never discover: a deep, haunting fear of being seen. Truly seen, not the image they've worked so hard to create, not the mask they wear so well, but the truth, the raw reality of who they are and what they hide from the world. Narcissists live behind a carefully crafted illusion. They depend on others to reflect the version of themselves they want to believe in. They feed on praise, attention, admiration, and most of all, control. They want to be the center of your world, not out of love, but out of need. Because your attention, your energy is the lifeline to their illusion. But the moment you begin to wake up to their game, when the fog starts to lift and the confusion starts to clear, something incredible happens. You start to see the patterns, the manipulation, the way they twist your words and play the victim. When you call them out, you begin to realize that all the love, all the validation, all the time you poured into them was never truly received. It was consumed. You realize that they were never trying to build a real connection. They were building a stage, and you were cast in a role you didn't agree to play. That realization is powerful, but what truly breaks their grip is not anger or revenge. It's not yelling or fighting fire with fire. Narcissists thrive on chaos and emotional reaction. They feed off your confusion, your doubt, your fear. What terrifies them isn't rage, it's clarity. What frightens them isn't confrontation, it's the truth. Spoken calmly with conviction. That's where your real power lies. Not in hurting them, but in standing firm. In your awareness. There is one sentence that will do what screaming never could. One sentence that will stop the cycle dead in its tracks. One sentence that sends a chill down their spine. Because it reveals the one thing they can't handle: exposure. It's not dramatic, not cruel, not insulting. In fact, it's completely neutral. And that's why it's so powerful. Because it's not about them, it's about you reclaiming yourself. And that sentence is this: I see who you really are, and you can't control me. Let those words sink in. They carry the weight of awakening, the strength of self-worth, and the final end to the role you never asked to play. It's a sentence that doesn't just inform, it declares. It says you are no longer confused, no longer manipulated, no longer under their spell. It doesn't try to fix them or explain anything. It draws a line in the sand and says you're done being a reflection of their ego. When you say this, you are no longer the supply they depend on. You're no longer feeding the mask. You are choosing yourself, choosing peace, choosing freedom. They fear this sentence not because it harms them, but because it ends their ability to harm you. It's a mirror, and they can't bear to look into it because they've spent their entire life avoiding what it might show. So speak it calmly, speak it with strength, and walk away with your head held high, not out of pride, but out of truth. Oof. I see who you really are, and you can't control me. That is the sentence that breaks the cycle and builds your freedom forever. Narcissists do not rely on strength or love to control others. They rely on confusion and manipulation. Their greatest weapon is not their intelligence or charm. It is their ability to make you doubt yourself, to twist reality in subtle ways that slowly unravel your sense of certainty. They do not take control by force. They take it by creating an environment where you constantly question your instincts, your memories, and your feelings. They turn conversations into traps. They rewrite history in the moment. They deny what was said and done, even when you remember it clearly. And over time, you begin to wonder if maybe it really is your fault. This kind of manipulation is not loud. It is quiet, consistent, and deeply damaging. They make you feel like you are the unstable one, like you are too sensitive or overreacting. They make you apologize when you were the one hurt. They flip the script so often that it starts to feel normal. And once you are caught in that loop, it becomes harder and harder to find your way out. That is how narcissists maintain control, not through brute strength, but through emotional disorientation. They condition you to seek their approval and dread their disapproval. They train you to walk on eggshells, always calculating how they might react to your words, your choices, your needs. Even your silence becomes a tool for them to manipulate. They accuse you of withdrawal. They demand attention. They make you feel guilty for needing space. And all the while, they keep feeding the idea that they are the victim and you are the problem. Worst part is that it often begins with love, or what feels like love. They give you compliments. They shower you with affection. They make you feel special. They mirror your dreams, your values, your hopes, and you believe you have found someone who truly understands you. But that phase never lasts because it was never real. It was bait. Once you are emotionally invested, they begin the slow process of taking control, of rewriting your identity to suit their needs. What makes this so dangerous is that it is often invisible to others. Narcissists are skilled at maintaining a charming image to the outside world. They can be successful, likable, and even admired by many. They present themselves as confident and caring, and no one sees the side you deal with behind closed doors. That isolation adds to your confusion, because if no one else sees the problem, maybe it really is you. That is the trap, and that is how they win. But the moment you begin to understand this dynamic, the moment you stop trying to fix what they have broken in you and start looking at the pattern, something shifts. You begin to see that the problem was never your emotions, your reactions, or your sensitivity. The problem was that you were being manipulated. The fog starts to lift and clarity begins to return. And that clarity is what they fear the most, because once you see the game they are playing, they can no longer play it. The confusion breaks, the spell is lifted, and you are no longer a puppet in their show. You begin to realize that your voice, your truth, and your boundaries matter. You begin to rebuild the trust in your own mind. When you refuse to be confused, you take away their power. You stand in your truth without needing them to validate it. You no longer explain yourself to someone who never intended to understand you. Anyway, that is the beginning of freedom. And that is the moment they begin to fear you, not because you are trying to hurt them, but because you finally see through them, and they can no longer control you. Clarity and boundaries are the exact things narcissists cannot stand, because they operate in the shadows of confusion, manipulation, and blurred lines. They thrive in situations where you are unsure of yourself, where your emotions are tangled, and where you are constantly second-guessing your decisions, your words, and even your reality. A clear mind is dangerous to them because it sees through the fog they work so hard to create. When you begin to establish clarity about who you are, what you want, and what you will no longer tolerate, you are no longer a source of easy control. Boundaries are terrifying to narcissists, not because they are inherently aggressive, but because they represent a limit, a line that cannot be crossed. And narcissists do not like being told no. They expect access to you whenever it suits them. They believe they are entitled to your time, your energy, your attention, and your emotions. Setting a boundary tells them they are not entitled to anything. It tells them you are not theirs to manipulate or mold into what serves them best. It tells them you are a separate person with a will of your own, and that is something they cannot handle. They push back against boundaries, not always with rage, but often with guilt, shame, or emotional blackmail. They might say you are being unfair or selfish. They might accuse you of not caring about them. They might act wounded and confused, as if they cannot understand why you would be so cruel. But this is not confusion. It is strategy, because if they can make you question your boundary, they can slip past it and regain control. This is why clarity must come first. You must know what you stand for, what you need, and what you will not allow before you can effectively defend it. Clarity is not just about seeing them for who they are. It is about seeing yourself clearly too. It is about recognizing that your needs matter, that your feelings are valid, and that you have every right to decide who is allowed into your life and under what terms. When you are clear about your values, you stop justifying them to people who do not respect them. When you are clear about your limits, you stop explaining them to people who only want to test them. One of the most powerful things you can do in the presence of a narcissist is to stay grounded in your clarity and hold firm to your boundaries without engaging in the chaos they try to create. They will attempt to provoke you, to draw you into an argument, to confuse the issue, to shift the blame. But when you stay calm, focused, and consistent, they lose their grip. Narcissists want a reaction. They want drama. They want you to break so they can reassert control. But your refusal to play their game is what disarms them. Imagine telling someone no and walking away without guilt. Imagine hearing their accusations and knowing none of it is true. Imagine being so rooted in your own sense of self that nothing they say can shake your foundation. That is the power of clarity and boundaries. It is not loud. It does not need to be cruel. It is simply firm and unwavering, and that is what makes it unstoppable. In the end, a narcissist cannot manipulate someone who refuses to be confused, and cannot control someone who enforces their boundaries with calm conviction. They may try to circle back. They may test your strength again, but once you have seen the truth, once you have felt the peace that comes from being in alignment with yourself, you will never go back to that fall, and that is why clarity and boundaries are their kryptonite, because they show that you are no longer afraid to stand in your truth, no matter who it threatens. Standing in truth is one of the most powerful things a person really can do, especially when dealing with someone who thrives on falsehoods, manipulation, and control. Narcissists build their sense of self around a carefully crafted illusion. They need to be admired. They need to be seen as superior and flawless, and they will go to great lengths to protect that image. The moment you start speaking truth, the moment you begin to call things what they really are, and refuse to participate in the game, they begin to panic, because truth is not something they can control. Truth is simple but powerful. It does not need to be shouted or proven. It does not require drama or attention. It just is. And for someone who operates in lies and deception, that is terrifying. When you begin to stand in your truth, you are no longer confused about what you are no longer denying what you see, and you are no longer afraid of how they will react. You are grounded, you are stable, and you are clear, and that clarity creates a power they cannot manipulate. The reason truth disrupts their false power is because it pulls back the curtain. It reveals the contradiction between who they pretend to be and who they really are. Narcissists depend on keeping people in the dark. They rely on confusion to maintain control. But when you start naming things, when you stop pretending, when you stop excusing their behavior, the illusion begins to crack. They can no longer use charm or guilt or blame to keep you in line, because you are not reacting to their story. You are responding to reality. And the truth is, they are not in control of you. They never were. What they had was influence over your thoughts, your fears. And once you take that back, their power dissolves. The moment you say this is what happened and I will not ignore it. The moment you say this is what I need and I am allowed to ask for it. The moment you say I know who I am and I will not let you define me. They lose control, not because you are trying to destroy them, but because you are reclaiming yourself. Narcissists fear truth because it does not bend to their will, and it does not seek their approval. It exists outside of their reach. And when you live in truth, they cannot touch you. They may call you difficult or ungrateful. They may try to twist your words or attack your character, but deep down they know they are not fighting you. They are fighting reality, and reality always wins. Eventually, you stand in truth. You also begin to heal. You stop seeking validation from someone who only ever gave it to control you. You stop trying to fix someone who was never interested in growth. You stop questioning your worth and start living in alignment with who you really are. That is the shift they cannot tolerate, because it means you are no longer a part of their fantasy. You are living in truth. Exposes what manipulation tries to hide. It shines a light in the dark corners where lies used to live, and it gives you the strength to walk away from anything that does not serve your peace. It is not always easy. It might mean facing painful realities or letting go of people you once cared about, but the reward is worth it, because when you live in truth, you gain something. They will never have authenticity, and that is a strength no narcissist can ever take from you. So hold your truth even when your voice shakes. Speak your truth even when it is uncomfortable. Live your truth even when it costs you people, because the ones who belong in your life will never fear your truth.
they will respect it. And that is how you take your power back for good. One powerful sentence can change everything, not because it attacks or insults, but because it breaks a pattern that was never meant to serve you. Narcissists operate in cycles. They repeat the same tactics, the same manipulations, the same emotional traps over and over, until you no longer recognize your own voice, your own needs, or your own strength. But the moment you speak a sentence rooted in clarity and conviction, you interrupt that cycle completely. It does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be loud. It simply needs to be true and unwavering. This sentence is not about revenge. It is not about hurting them or proving a point. It is about reclaiming your voice in a place where it was once silenced. It is about standing still while the storm tries to rage around you and refusing to be moved. It is the sentence that shows you are no longer available to be manipulated, no longer available to be controlled, no longer available to be shaped into something that pleases them while breaking yourself in the process. Narcissists do not expect you to speak from strength. They expect you to fold under pressure, to doubt yourself, to stay quiet, to avoid confrontation. They expect you to play the role they gave you, the role of the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who always bends just enough to keep them comfortable. When you break out of that role with one calm sentence that speaks your truth, they do not know how to respond because it is outside the script they have written for you. This sentence is not designed to win an argument because you are no longer playing that game. It is not designed to make them see the light because that is not your responsibility. It is designed to set you free, to create a boundary that is final, to end the back and forth that has drained your energy and your spirit. The power of this sentence comes from the fact that it is not reactive. It is decisive. You are not begging. You are not accusing. You are simply stating what is and what will no longer be allowed. It might be a sentence like, I see what you are doing, and I will not engage, or I know who I am, and I do not need your validation, or I will not explain myself to someone who refuses to hear me. Whatever the words, the meaning is the same. You are stepping out of the illusion and into your own strength. You're choosing yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a necessary way, because no one
gets to define you
except you. That moment when you speak your truth may feel small, but it is a turning point. You might feel fear or doubt rise up because this is unfamiliar ground, but stay with it because your freedom lies just beyond that fear. Narcissists count on your silence. They count on your hesitation because that is how they keep control. But when you speak clearly and calmly from a place of knowing, you shift the power dynamic completely. They may react with anger or confusion. They may try to twist your words or accuse you of being the problem, but do not be moved. Their reaction is proof that the sentence worked, that the pattern has been broken. They are not afraid of you. They are afraid of what you represent. Now, truth.
Boundaries, self-respect, and independence. These are things they cannot control, and that makes them deeply uncomfortable. So speak the sentence, not for them, but for you. Let it be your declaration, your release, your reminder that you are no longer the version of yourself that tolerated confusion, disrespect. You have found your voice, and with it, you will rewrite the story from this moment forward, because one powerful sentence can be the beginning of everything you have been waiting to reclaim. You don't need to fight to win your power back from a narcissist, because the real battle is not in proving them wrong or trying to expose them to others. The real battle is internal. It is about reclaiming your own self-worth and refusing to allow someone else to define it for you. Narcissists want you to fight. They want you to engage in their chaos, to respond to their provocations, and get pulled into their emotional web. Because when you do that, you are still playing their game. And as long as you are playing their game, they still have influence over your mind and heart. What makes you truly untouchable to a narcissist is when you no longer react, when you no longer explain, defend, or justify, when you no longer need to be understood or validated by them. When you stand in silence with your self-worth intact and your head held high, they feel it more deeply than any argument or confrontation ever could. They feel the shift because you are no longer dependent on their approval, and for someone who feeds off control and admiration, that loss is unbearable. Your power does not come from fighting louder. It comes from refusing to fight at all, because you finally understand that their opinion is no longer relevant. Your self-worth is no longer up for negotiation, and your identity is no longer shaped by their perception of you. Narcissists are terrified of people who no longer need them, who no longer respond to their bait, who no longer chase after them for love, for validation, or for closure, because that means they have lost the thing they rely on most. Your attention. You do not need to scream or explain your side of the story, because someone who has already decided to misunderstand you will never hear you anyway. You do not need to correct their lies, because your truth is not built on their version of reality. You do not need to prove that you are good enough, because the fact that you exist is already proof of your worth. The moment you realize this is the moment you begin to detach from their control, and that is when you become someone they cannot handle. Self-worth is not about arrogance. It is about peace. It is about knowing that you are valuable, regardless of how someone treats you. It is about choosing yourself, even when others do not. It is about refusing to shrink, to make someone else feel powerful. It is about walking away not to punish them, but to protect your own peace and your own future. And that kind of inner strength is what narcissists fear the most, because it reminds them of what they lack. They are not afraid of your anger. They are afraid of your indifference. They are not afraid of your voice raised in protest. They are afraid of your silence that no longer seeks to explain. They are not afraid of you moving on with bitterness. They are afraid of you moving on with joy, because it means they no longer have access to you and to them. That is the ultimate loss. Your self-worth is not something they gave you, so it is not something they can take away. It was always yours. It may have been buried under years of gaslighting, manipulation, and confusion, but it never disappeared. The moment you remember who you are and live from that place, you become free. And in that freedom, you are no longer someone they can intimidate or control. So do not fight. Do not argue. Do not try to make them see. Instead, turn inward, reconnect with your worth, and walk in your truth. Let your peace be your power. Let your stillness be your strength. And let your self-worth be the wall they can never climb, because when you no longer look to them to define you, they will no longer have the power to break you. That is how you win. Not by fighting, but by remembering who you are and refusing to forget it ever again. Letting go of the need for closure is one of the most liberating and courageous decisions you can make, especially after experiencing a relationship with a narcissist. Because closure is something they will almost never give you, not because you do not deserve it, but because giving you peace means giving up control. And a narcissist does not want you to have peace. They want you stuck in confusion. They want you questioning yourself, replaying conversations, blaming yourself for things you never did, and wondering what you could have done differently to make them treat you better. But the truth is, there is nothing you could have done differently that would have made them love you in a healthy way, because their love is conditional, their kindness is performative, and their interest in you is always about how useful you are to their ego. You were never truly seen by them, only used, and as painful as that realization is, it is also the beginning of your freedom. Because once you understand that there was no real emotional connection, only emotional control, you stop searching for meaning in the wreckage and start focusing on rebuilding yourself. Closure does not come from them apologizing or explaining why they treated you the way they did. It comes when you decide to stop waiting for answers that will never come. It comes when you choose to give yourself the peace they never offered and the clarity they tried to keep from you. Closure is not about getting the last word. It is about saying your own final word to yourself and choosing to move forward with or without their understanding. Narcissists want to leave doors open.
They want you to wonder if they might come back, if they still care, if maybe it was all just a misunderstanding, because as long as you are wondering, they still have a hold on your heart. But when you shut that door, not with anger, but with finality, you send a message that is louder than anything you could say. In words, you are no longer available for confusion, manipulation, or false hope. Choosing your own closure is an act of self-respect. It means you are no longer willing to bleed for someone who never acknowledged your wounds. It means you are no longer willing to give your energy to someone who only ever used it to feed their own emptiness. It means you understand that your healing cannot depend on someone who caused the hurt to begin with. And that is a level of power that narcissists cannot tolerate. They fear people who heal without them. They fear people who do not need to keep the connection alive, even through anger or resentment, because it means they no longer have emotional access. And that is what they truly crave more than anything: your emotions, your attention, your energy, even if it is negative. When you stop giving that to them, when you go silent not out of fear, but out of strength, they fill a void. And that void is the loss of control. Closure is not a gift they give you, it is a gift you give yourself when you decide that your peace matters more than understanding someone who never really saw you. When you choose to stop chasing answers and start living in truth. When you allow yourself to grieve what never was, so you can make space for what can be. Narcissists do not get to define the end of your story. You do, and you can end it with grace, clarity, and peace. So let go of the apology you will never receive. Let go of the explanation that will never come. Let go of the idea that if you had just been more patient, more loving, or more forgiving, it would have worked out. And instead accept this truth: you were always enough, they just were never capable of appreciating it. Your healing starts when you stop waiting for them to fix what they broke and start building something new with the pieces they could not destroy: your strength, your self-worth, and your future. So now you stand here no longer searching for their approval, no longer trapped in confusion, no longer waiting for a truth that was never theirs to give. You have seen through the illusion, you have felt the weight of their manipulation, and you have walked through the fire of their silence and their chaos. And yet here you are stronger, not because of them, but in spite of them. You have found the truth, and you did not run from it. You claimed it, you spoke it, and you stood in it with clarity, with courage, and with dignity. They feared that you would find this version of yourself, the one who no longer plays small, the one who no longer bends to be accepted, the one who no longer fears walking away. You spoke the one sentence that changed everything, not to destroy them, but to free yourself. And in doing so, you became something a narcissist cannot handle: someone. They cannot shake someone. They cannot control someone. They can no longer reach. Remember this: your power was never in what they gave you. Your power was always in what they tried to take. And your voice, your truth, your boundaries, your worth. You never lost those things. They were waiting for you to reclaim them. So walk forward, not with bitterness, but with peace, not with revenge, but with wisdom, not with fear, but with quiet, unstoppable strength. Because the moment you chose truth, the moment you chose yourself, you won. And that victory they will feel forever.